Almost 2,000 years ago, the Roman Empire fought its very own version of the Gulf War. Tonight we tell the story of Imperial Rome's desperate battle against a Saddam Hussein-like figure who antagonized Rome one time too many. Just like Saddam, he even took hostages as a human shield against invasion. This is the story of Rome's Dacian Wars. And it's the true life tale of how one lowly stormtrooper in the Imperial Legions became a hero in Rome's war against terror. This is an empire going to war. It is mobilizing its troops to invade a rogue state that has pushed it too far, one time too many. But it's not the first time this has happened.
All great powers have to decide what to do with troublesome people on the periphery. Rome did, Britain did, and now America does.
Military motives are eternal. They just resonate. Here you've got Rome being irritated by an alien culture that they suddenly decide to turn on. Well, you can see analogies between the United States turning on Iraq. Here you have Saddam Hussein irritating at them for a long time.
And of course, now, like Rome, on so many occasions, they've decided that the way to deal with it is to go in and just simply remove him and every vestige of his regime.
It's the nature of war that it's a bloody and aggressive activity, and the Romans prepared themselves very thoroughly for that. They also understood that if you're going to hold territory, you had to have boots on the ground, and that's where the sandals of the legionaries really worked.
Today, we're all too familiar with the hard life of a soldier, fighting for civilization. But this is hardly a modern phenomenon.
2,000 years ago, Rome's legionaries fought a knock-down, drag-out fight against a rogue state in a place called Dacia. This is the story of that war.
Rome's power lay in her imperial legions. For hundreds of years, their military might spread Rome's influence across the known world, conquering all comers. And the booty from those wars flowed into the city of Rome itself to pay for its great buildings and monuments.
Roman politics was really underpinned by conquest. Every time there was a new emperor, he wanted to fight a war and go out, make conquests and put up huge monuments to show that he was the victor.
It even works in our democracies today. I mean, Margaret Thatcher, after the Falklands, cashed in on a huge reservoir of popularity in this country.
They always say that any prime minister or president really needs a good war to make their mark on history.
Ancient Rome was the greatest city in the world, greater than New York, London or Hong Kong today. But 2,000 years ago, this greatness was built on blood. Thanks to its many successful battles, Rome was a city run by slave labor. And the gold won from these battles paid for the government, the wages, everything. But Rome was more than just a city. Rome was an empire. And right at the heart of that empire, in the center of ancient Rome, stands a symbol of one of the most spectacular victories Rome ever scored. This is Trajan's Column. Trajan's Column was the news footage of its day.
The Americans are now in a fight they believe they simply have to win.
Each carving depicts a key event of the Emperor Trajan's Dacian War in graphic detail.
I think this could be the start of shock and awe.
It shows the superpowers' invasion of Dacia, the surrender of the Dacian chieftains, the fall of the Dacian capital, and the final flight and capture of the Dacian king. Yet for all its triumphalist glory, Trajan's column cannot tell us what it was like to be a squaddy in the Roman army. But a remarkable find has changed all that. In 1965, a Greek farmer stumbled across this tombstone in his field. It read, "I am Tiberius Claudius Maximus, veteran of the legions,
bearer of the standard, and bodyguard of the general. I captured Decebalus. This is a record of my life."
And in typical Roman fashion, it goes on to detail his whole career. Using the information of this phenomenal discovery, we will reveal how life in the Roman army during the Dacian Wars was not very different to the life of a squaddy in the modern armies of today. We shall bring to life the true story of a hero of the Dacian Wars. We shall tell the tale of Maximus, the ordinary man who captured a king.
Maximus was not a conscript because, like the modern British army, the Roman army was made up of professionals. We're talking here about long-term soldiers serving for 20-odd years, just like the modern British army, where you would do 22 years service.
And it was, I think, an army people wanted to get into, not like many historical armies that have had to force people. And it was one that was a really highly respected career.
I served in the 7th Claudian Legion, renowned for its loyalty.
The tombstone of Maximus tells us that he joined the legion sometime after AD 85, during the reign of the Emperor Domitian. But like the modern army, the Roman army didn't let just anyone join its ranks. The Roman army, as befits an elite fighting force, has strict rules of entry. Roman citizenship is vital. That's no problem for Maximus. He's a proper Roman boy. And soldiers should be physically fit and at least 6 foot tall, so no problem there. And finally, a letter of recommendation is needed, which in Maximus's case would have been from his father, a veteran of many conquests. So it's just jobs for the boys, of course. Maximus was recruited at an interesting time, because across the frontier, the barbarians were getting restless. Dacia was a barbarian kingdom which lay north of the river Danube, in what is now Romania and Hungary. It was a hilly, hostile land. And just as Saddam coveted the rich oil fields of Kuwait, its king Decebalus dreamed of taking over the fertile region south of the river Danube that lay in Roman territory. In contrast to their king's ambitions, his subjects were a peaceful farming people who lived in homesteads dotted between the mountain strongholds of their chiefs. This is Burebista. He's a typical Dacian farmer. His family has lived peacefully on this farm for more than 200 years. Until now. Burebista is not just a farmer, he's also a warrior. When his king, Decebalus, decides to go to war, Burebista sharpens the blade he uses for his farm work and goes wherever his king tells him to. Like every soldier in every war, he's only obeying orders. He doesn't know or care that Decebalus is testing the limits of the Roman frontier. He's just a pawn in the games of empire. The rogue Dacian king is constantly toying with the superpower of his day, seeing how far he can go. But toying with a superpower is a deadly business. The new emperor, Domitian, has a lot to prove. His father and brother scored great conquests for the Roman Empire. Now Domitian needs a victory to match the triumphs of his ancestors. But all that is a long way away for the new recruits who are being marched into the Roman fortress of Viminacium on the Danube. Like any army base today, a Roman legionary fortress isn't just a military camp, it's a miniature city. At its centre stands the commander's house, and in front of this is the headquarters building. Around them is a hospital, a bathhouse, workshops and grand houses for the other officers. More workshops and granaries line the main street, and all of this is designed to service the 60 or so barrack blocks that house more than 5,000 soldiers. One of these blocks will be the home of Maximus and his fellow recruits during their training period.
So who would live in a dingy hole like this? Our man Maximus, that's who. You have to be pretty pally to live with someone in a place like this. Believe it or not, 8 men are crammed in this room, which means Maximus has to share his bed with 7 other blokes. And he better get used to it, because he might be sharing it with them for the next 25 years.
So how do we know all this? Well, thanks to a remarkable set of documents uncovered at the Roman fort of Vindolanda right here in Britain, we get a graphic picture of life in a Roman fort at exactly the time that Maximus started his military career.
The Vindolanda tablets are on wood, and they've been preserved by the soil conditions, and they were actually found in a sort of rubbish tip. They'd been thrown away, because otherwise they would probably have been filed and lost to us.
They're the accidental survivals of everyday paperwork. Duty rosters, letters, dinner invitations, supply dockets, things like this.
You need to know just how many soldiers you've got, what supplies they need, weapons, equipment and so on. In that way, the Roman army is very like the modern British army.
Masculus to Commander Cerealis. What do you want us to do tomorrow? Do we bring the unit back to base or not? By the way, we've run out of beer. Can you send some?
But it's not all beer and skittles in the Roman army. Meet Cado, the centurion. He's like a British sergeant major.
What is it? You pile of shit! Why you jump? Meant to be a man, don't jump!
And it's this man's mission in life to make the recruits' next few weeks a living hell.
Get up, you lazy bastard!
Once upon a time, a Tin Pot dictator ordered his armies to advance across their borders and seize the lucrative territory that lay just beyond. But the superpower of the day could not allow this act of naked aggression to go unchecked. It began to mobilize its troops in preparation for war.
If history teaches us anything, it is that we must resist aggression or it will destroy our freedoms.
But this is not August 1990, it's AD 86. And the dictator is not Saddam Hussein, he's the Dacian king, Decebalus. And the superpower of the day is Rome. In response, the Emperor Domitian has gathered his legions for a final showdown with the Dacian king. New recruits have been pouring in from the provinces. Among them is an ordinary squaddie called Maximus. Though he doesn't know it, he's destined to become a hero. Maximus isn't even a proper soldier yet. He's about to go through weeks of training hell under the iron fist of Cado, the centurion. A centurion is like a sergeant major. But Cado is not a title, it's a nickname. It means, give me another. This is what our man shouts every time he breaks his staff across his recruits' backs. The name was first given to a centurion whose legendary cruelty sparked a mutiny of the legions under Augustus.
Stand up straight! And this, what's this?
He doesn't just use the rod on his soldiers either. There's a letter from a merchant at Vindolanda complaining how a centurion there beat him with his staff.
He beat me and made me pour my goods down the drain. I beg you, sir, not to allow an innocent man like me to be beaten with sticks.
This is the kind of man to whom Maximus has entrusted his life for the next 20 years. Over the next few weeks, Cato puts the new recruits through a training program every bit as hard as the Royal Marine Commandos endure today. Running, marching, javelin throwing, marching, combat training.
Get in there, over the top, back and get it. No, more balls.
Swimming. And marching. It was just as hard. According to one Roman military manual, the legionary was expected to march 24 miles in 5 hours, carrying full kit weighing 20 kilos. That's the equivalent of 20 bags of sugar. And at the end of the march, he had to build a camp. He also did gymnastics. Every Roman recruit was taught how to jump onto a horse in full armour. Maximus is very good at this because he's grown up riding horses in the highlands of Greece. He doesn't know it yet, but this is going to make his career. Finally, the training is over. Now Maximus is ready. Now he's a real soldier. He's graduated at a crucial time because the Emperor Domitian has decided to invade Dacia, and Maximus's legion will be the spearhead of the invasion. With 30 legions stationed throughout the empire, Rome was always ready for war. The legion was made up of 5,500 Roman citizens, organised in 10 cohorts. Each regular cohort contained 480 men in 6 centuries. A century is like a platoon in the British Army, but despite being called a century, it only has 80 men instead of 100. Don't ask why. And each century contained 10 squads of 8 men who lived together in the barracks. It is soldiers like this that form the backbone of the Roman army. Soon they will storm into Dacia to stop the barbarians raiding over the frontiers. But first, there are preparations to be made. Cato is giving out the duty rosters at the Centurions' daily meeting. Maximus is making notes. Because he can write and he's good with numbers, he's been seconded as a clerk.
In any army, you need to know who you've got available to do a job and also to make sure they've got the right training and experience to do it. So just like the modern British Army, the Roman Army would make sure that they had a duty roster for things like guard duty, protecting a camp, patrols if on a border or frontier, and of course the day-to-day stuff like cleaning out the latrines.
But it's so that the officers can keep a close eye on everybody, so they're not just standing around the back, kicking their heels, wasting time. We're particularly fortunate with the writing tablets from Vindolanda to have substantial parts of a duty roster, which gives us really literally the day-to-day activities of a Roman regiment.
18th of May. Daily report of the 1st Tungurian cohort, Julius Veracundus commanding. Total strength 752, including 6 centurions, of whom 456 are absent.
What reports like this show is that Roman soldiers didn't just sit around in their forts waiting for something to happen. Surprisingly, up to 2/3 of Maximus's unit could be away doing other things. Those who weren't sick were busy at various trades. Some were armourers, others were carpenters. There were plasterers, builders, and of course, cooks. And what your average Roman soldier seems to have done most of his life was build things. If he wasn't building a fort, he was building a road. If he wasn't building a road, he was building a bathhouse. If he wasn't building a bathhouse, he was building an aqueduct. In fact, the army built most of the Roman monuments in Europe, and this architecture set an example that would influence all the European civilizations to come.
So powerful was the legacy of Rome in terms of its buildings. They were so impressive that in Britain they thought they were built by giants. They didn't think they were built by people at all. And it really wasn't for 800 years until the Western world began to catch up with the type and scale of building that Romans had built. And the Roman legionaries built this themselves. They were the advanced guard of Roman civilization.
Maximus's legion was building a bridge, a pontoon bridge to be exact, because in order to invade Dacia, the legions had to get across the river Danube. This gorge is one of the most difficult areas of the Danube to cross. How the hell do we get across that?
Well, the Roman army had both brain and brawn on its side. They're building a bridge by anchoring barges across the river. They then cover these with timber planks and hem them in at the sides with railings. Cleverly, this massive undertaking has already been prefabricated by legionaries beavering away in the fortress's workshops. Of course, it takes a mammoth amount of work and ingenuity, but it's all in a day's work for the boot boys of Rome.
But Maximus isn't breaking his back building bridges. He's struck lucky in two ways. First, he's been seconded as a clerk. This is a cushy number and makes him immune from basic duties. And Maximus has another, even more bankable skill. Remember, he can ride. Every Roman legion had 120 cavalrymen. The most trusted of these became the personal bodyguard of the legionary commander. And this is what Maximus's tombstone says he was, a singularis. And as if all this wasn't enough, he was also the treasurer of his unit. Today is payday, but it's not just a simple matter of handing out the money. There are deductions to be made.
Roman soldiers were paid an annual sum, but the Romans took most of it away again once they'd given it to them. They paid them 3 times a year, and they took away money for clothing, food, weapons if they'd damaged or lost them. They made them save money for their pensions, and they took money away from the burial club, so what they'd end up with is a bit of small change in their pockets.
And whilst this changed from period to period, it looks as though they were buying into the army in a sense, taking part in an internal economy.
Then there were the unofficial expenses. As chief centurion, Cato has come to collect the holiday fund. This was a bribe paid by each unit to the centurions to get them out of the worst jobs, like latrine duty. But there are perks for being company clerk. By Roman standards, most legionaries are pretty well paid, earning 300 sesterces a year. As a legionary cavalryman, Maximus is automatically paid more, and he gets a bonus for being the commander's bodyguard, giving him 600 sesterces, twice the normal pay. And like every soldier in every century, Roman legionaries certainly knew how to spend their money. Most of them spent it on women, and there were any number of sleazy drinking holes in the shantytown outside the fort where they could fritter it away. And wherever there's a bar, there's always a barmaid with a heart of gold.
This is Satua. Like thousands of poor women all over the empire, she's come to the settlement outside the fort to make her fortune. But unlike most women in her position, she's struck lucky. She's found Maximus. Officially, he can't marry her because the soldiers aren't allowed to marry. But unofficially, they're man and wife. If he chooses to stay with her when he leaves the legions, their children will be citizens, and she'll be set up for life. So she's got every reason to make sure he doesn't stray elsewhere. Believe it or not, it's relationships like this that make the Roman Empire work. Veterans like Maximus often settled on the frontiers to stay with their wives, and that spread the Roman way of life across the empire. And their pay while they were soldiers formed part of a continuous economic cycle that kept the whole empire running. The coins that Maximus is giving to Satua are about to go on a journey that makes them the lifeblood of the empire. Satua pops out to the local baker's to get some bread, giving him some of Maximus's coin to settle the account. The baker uses the coin to pay the local grain merchant, who's just bought another delivery. Grain merchant pays his dues to the local tax collector. This man has bought the tax contract from the government and makes a tidy profit on the side. And eventually, some of these coins end up back on Maximus's desk to get paid to the soldiers all over again. And that, my friends, is how Roman civilization works. The soldiers guard the cities raise the taxes pay the soldiers, and they spend them in the cities. You see, civilization, which comes from the Roman word for city, is just a neat way of always making sure the soldiers get paid. The army is about to earn its pay, and so is Maximus. 2 years after he joined up, the Emperor has finally ordered Maximus's legion forward. The Dacian Wars have begun. Behind them, their women wonder if they will ever return. The Emperor's plan is simple. The legions will attack the hill fort at Tapai, which guards the entrance to the mountains. If it falls, the way to the Dacian capital is open. The Dacian king, Decebalus, decides to fight. For him, this is a strategic gamble. For his warriors, it's a matter of life or death. Burebista stands with his back to his home. Now he must defend it with his life. It is the eve of battle. By now the Roman soldiers know what they're up against. In the vicious guerrilla war that has got them here, Burebista and his companions have given the Roman army an object lesson in the falx, the deadly scythed blade that is the favoured weapon of the Dacian warrior. Wielded properly, it could puncture right through a Roman helmet. So the army's blacksmiths have been hard at work. Some soldiers have been given the banded arm guards of gladiators to protect their arms from the blow of the falx.
and most of their helmets have been reinforced by a cross brace crudely riveted to the top of the crown. They hope that it will stop this from happening. Maximus watches from his position, guarding the legionary commander as the legions advance. His tombstone tells us that he was the standard bearer of his unit. But he's not on horseback today. Today is the day of the foot sloggers. But Burebista and his companions don't intend to become fodder for the legions. Suddenly, unexpectedly, they charge. The force of their assault catches the legions by surprise. Cato and his fellow centurions try to stiffen the line, but they haven't got a chance. Burebista's wedge smashes through the Roman front line and advances on the Roman standards behind. As Maximus and Burebista come face to face, their confrontation is mirrored all across the line. The result of this fight will decide the fate of the battle. Burebista kicks out. As Maximus falls, the whole battle hangs in the balance. Only a miracle can save them now. It is AD 87. And the Roman army is fighting its own version of the Gulf War. But for the Romans, the battle is not going well. The fearsome Dacian warriors have mounted a surprise attack and charged the legion's standards. As the legion is overwhelmed, Maximus finds his life is on the line. Just when all seems lost, Cato steps in to rally the line. This is what they trained for. This is why Cato would never let up. When the chips are down, the Roman army always comes back fighting. Wounded, Maximus lies back exhausted, but he's done enough. His tombstone tells us that he was twice decorated for bravery during this first Dacian war. Carved upon the stone are images of the neck and armbands he was awarded for his courage. In the aftermath of the battle, both sides are battered and bruised. Despite so much death, Burebista has been lucky. All he has is bruises. Had his wound been as bad as the one he inflicted on Maximus, he probably would not have survived. Maximus is more fortunate. He has the legion's medics to look after him.
Really, the Roman soldier was comparatively well supported in medical terms. The army looked after their soldiers because they needed the manpower and they needed to keep well-trained, expensive soldiers in good health. And they did this in various ways. Following on from the Greek world, they had field doctors, medici, from which we get the word medic.
You can see Roman soldiers shouting medico, medico, and US Army people shouting medic, medic. It's the same thing.
helicopter to land now. We got a critical patient needs to get out of here.
They did have hospitals as well. They had field hospitals, and the forts had hospitals. This we know from legionary fortresses where they have found hospitals.
Legionaries and soldiers are trained professionals. They cost a lot of money. This is not really being done from the kindness of their general's heart. This is being done because they are an incredibly valuable commodity. You need to get them patched up and back out on the front line as soon as you can.
Despite his victory, Domitian was forced to withdraw. In fact, he never managed to conquer Dacia. By AD 95, 10 years after Maximus first joined the legions, the emperor had given up and disguised this by making Decebalus a friend of the Roman people. But the title fooled no one. Domitian had failed.
The Dacian fiasco was the last straw. Less than a year later, Domitian was dead, stabbed to death in a palace plot led by his wife. Nice. Rome now has a new man in charge, the Emperor Trajan. Future historians will see Trajan as a great emperor. Personally, I thought he was a warmongering thug. But history is always written by the victors, and Trajan never lost a war in his life.
By AD 105, another decade later, the new emperor was ready to finish the Dacians once and for all. Decebalus tried taking hostages as a human shield, but he'd reckoned without the Romans. The hostages committed suicide.
And that's when Decebalus discovered that Trajan was a very different emperor to Domitian, because Trajan would not rest until Decebalus was dead.
Trajan planned a lightning strike on two fronts. One army would push through Tapae, burning everything in its path. At the same time, Trajan would lead the main army straight towards the Dacian capital. For this plan to work, the emperor needed cavalry, and lots of it. The legionary cavalry weren't enough, so he needed the auxiliaries, allied troops commanded by Roman officers who provided the specialist units the legions could not supply. So that's why Maximus found himself promoted out of the legions into a unit of auxiliary cavalry in Trajan's Dacian War. With Maximus's cavalry showing the way, the Romans stormed through Dacia like avenging angels. Tapae is leveled, along with any other hill fort that doesn't open its gates. Terrified of Trajan's vengeance, the Dacian chieftains surrender in droves. Only Decebalus's most fanatical followers, those who have lost everything in the Roman blitzkrieg, choose to answer the last, desperate call of the Dacian king. But as the carvings on Trajan's column show us, the Dacian capital cannot hold. Just like Iraq 2,000 years later, no one can stand against an angry superpower. The might of the Roman war machine smashes down its walls, and the legions storm into the citadel. Once the capital has fallen, the Romans pillage it ruthlessly.
This being the Roman army, even rape and pillage is meticulously organized. The soldiers line up and wait for their order. Vastare! Smash and burn, and then systematically tear through the town, looting everything in sight.
Booty and prisoners are deposited at the feet of the quartermasters, who keep a meticulous record of what each unit has done. This means that they can share out the spoils of war at the end properly.
Well, it's always good to have a fair system for raping and looting, don't you think? But Burebista is not amongst the prisoners. Incredibly, he's escaped, along with his king, Decebalus, and fled into the forests of Dacia. The word goes out. Capture Decebalus. Cavalry fans across the forests. By sheer luck, it's Maximus who tracks him down. But Burebista and his king do not intend to be taken alive. They would rather die here in the forests of their homeland than be paraded through Rome as slaves of the victorious emperor. Like the hunted beast he is, King Decebalus stands at bay. This is the moment depicted at the top of Trajan's column. You can see Maximus frantically reaching forward to grab Decebalus's knife. But before he can get there, the Dacian king cuts his own throat. With this last desperate act, the Dacian wars are over.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Maximus's tombstone proudly tells us what happened next.
I captured Decebalus and brought his head to the Emperor Trajan at Ranistorum.
For his exploits, Maximus was promoted and was awarded the Roman equivalent of the Victoria Cross by the Emperor himself. After the war, Trajan began the project of rebuilding Dacia. He built a new capital for the Roman province on the ruins of Tapae and commissioned a great forum to celebrate his victory in the centre of Rome, crowned by Trajan's column. Believing Rome invincible, Trajan moved on to the next on the list of his own axis of evil.
Our government has taken unprecedented measures to defend the homeland, and we will continue to hunt down the enemy before he can strike.
In Dacia, we have a great invasion, clear-cut victory, regime change, and a new province. In the east, however, towards the end of his life, he hares off into what's now Iraq, Mesopotamia down to the Red Sea. And what he does there is overextend his conquest. And once the area's been occupied, there's local insurgency and the Roman army is completely overstretched. And eventually Trajan's successor, Hadrian, decides we must get the army out of there, retrench back to our own frontiers in Syria, and stop an unwinnable war.
As soon as Trajan is dead, Hadrian decides to pull back, but not only in the east. He decides to delimit the empire by running boundaries, solid frontiers. Hadrian's Wall in Britain is one example of this. It cuts off the country halfway up.
And luckily for us, in the middle of that frontier, we have Vindolanda with its writing tablets for precisely this Trajanic and Hadrianic period.
A tombstone from this area shows us just how much Rome's multinational soldiers mixed with the local population.
I, Barates of Syria, put up this tombstone to my wife, Regina, a native Briton from the Catavoloni tribe.
Back in Dacia, Satua became part of this local integration. She married another soldier and settled in the colony built on the ruins of Tapae. Her son grew up to join the legions. As for Maximus, he never married. He loved the army so much that he signed on as a veteran at the end of his 20 years' service and fought for Trajan all over the empire. He died shortly after Trajan in 117 AD. He'd served for more than 30 years.
Those years in the army were clearly the best years of Maximus's life. And they left him rich enough to commission this nice, fancy tombstone, all that survived to tell his tale. And at the top is carved his proudest moment, the capture of Decebalus.